Good afternoon and welcome to today's APM webinar, How to Get Started in Project Data Analytics with Dr. James Smith from Projecting Success. My name is Robert Allen and I'm APM Branches Manager and I'll be your host for today. It's great to see so many people joining us today and I hope this finds you all well. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded and you are in listen mode only. That's not to say that we don't want you to get involved. Within your main control panel, you'll see the questions function. Please fire the questions through to us and James will happily answer these at the end. James is also doing a Mentimeter to join this presentation, so keep an eye out for that and please get involved. This session will count towards your CPD and should last no longer than an hour. I personally would like to thank the volunteers of the SIG and branch APMs for planning this event and for all your continued support at this time. So, on to James. Dr. James Smith is the Chief Technology Officer of Projecting Success. James is responsible for a wide scope spanning full stack development through to data science and AI. So on that note, I will pass over to James and I hope everyone enjoys today's webinar.
Thank you, Robert. That's a great introduction. That's brilliant. And a massive thank you to the APM as well for hosting me today. So as you can see, the title of what we're going to be talking about today is How to Get Started in Project Data Analytics. And we're going to be covering sort of three main topics today. So the potential impact of utilizing data within projects, how to prepare yourself for the future, and how you can actually get started with this preparation as well. So just a quick kind of bit of background of maybe why to you about this. So about 4 years ago, Projecting Success realized that project data wasn't really being utilized. So because of this, we founded the Project Data Analytics community with about 5,500 members, and that's growing all the time. We love to inspire people and upskill them and help provide kind of thought leadership in this area. And we think that the project data analytics is going to make a massive difference, and we're absolutely convinced it's going to be transformational. So just a little bit about me. So Robert's kindly read out my bio, but just to give you a little bit more information as well. I'm a mathematician by training. I have a PhD in applied mathematics. I'm actually an ex-university lecturer in mathematics, and I transitioned from academia about 3 years ago into data science and data analytics. So really I am kind of a data scientist, analyst at the core. But because I'm CTO, I kind of cover all the technical things within the company. So that's everything from building and managing all of our predictive insights and models down to actually delivering training as well for apprentices. And I might get a chance to talk a bit more about that later on in this webinar. So where are we now? Okay, what can machines already achieve? So they can already automate things like road design. They could already lay out buildings and understand the specific demands of each role. We can predict the weather incredibly accurately, using massive data sets and machine learning models that we've got. We can predict the likelihood of cancer and detect breast cancer as good or even better than a human. We can identify patterns in data and help us with fraud detection. But at the moment, we really struggle to leverage data in project delivery. I mean, projects like HS2, they've gone massively over budget and over schedule. So why can't we apply all of the great things that we do in lots of different other sectors and lots of areas of our lives onto project data as well? But just imagine if you could assess the probability of benefits being realized and the best way to influence these successes. What about identifying effective project management? So what's worked well, what hasn't worked well in the past? Or even preempt some change. And if we focus on risk specifically, then what other risks are also selected, or autocomplete functionality. So if a risk is identified, then this is auto-completed and you're allowed to amend it as necessary as the risk manager. Auto-population of risk registers, which comes with a big caveat that if you have the scope and the parameters for a project, then the risk register could be automatically populated, of course. This might de-skill the role and cause other problems as well, but something that's definitely possible, maybe a good kind of a template to start on. We could use it for heightened awareness. So, you know, if a particular risk is likely to arise in a certain section of the project, maybe we need to be particularly alert at that point, maybe right at the end. And risk awareness, which risks emerge right at the beginning or right at the end, or do they emerge in slightly less impactful way, and then they very rapidly develop into something. We could use it for predicting lead indicators, for risk mitigation, so which mitigation actions have been successfully mitigated, or which actions were not so successful. Investment of risk drawdown, so which drawdown has the greatest impact, you know, which investments should or shouldn't be repeated. All of these things can be related back to a use case that can be solved using data. Again, things like providing assurance as well, so forecast versus actual, etc., etc. So looking again at risk, so this idea of a different role. So what will a risk manager be doing once we start to utilize all of this project data? At the moment, risk managers, and this has come from goconstruct.org, and I've pulled off a kind of a bit of a job specification, I guess, and some hours and some salary, but generally speaking, at the moment, a risk manager collects risks from the team, they document them, they assign actions, they monitor it, and they report on this. But in the future, once we start to utilize data and we have all of these, all of the aspects of risk are recorded, and there's a forensic trail for all of them, then this will be much more data driven, much more forensic, and all of the decision making will be augmented. It will all be based around statistical analysis, and all of the drudgery, all of the copying and pasting data and moving information and having to look up old risk registers, etc. All of this will be automated, so none of that mundane work will be for a risk manager. So this is just one of the roles, one of many roles I think is going to change, and we're going to discuss a few more as well. So another example, a functional manager. So if you imagine you had the head of function for risk management, and I'll just give you a few seconds just to read those 8 bullet points. So every single function here emits a forensic data trail, but we're just not using it, we're not leveraging it. And if we are, that's extremely rare. So another example, stakeholder management. Management is all about developing or creating this stakeholder engagement plan. We do a lot of work with networks, so we use graphs a lot in data analytics, but we're not really from a stakeholder engagement. So we should be able to, or we can look at engagement plans, and we can make sure that they apply and they're built from, and we're leveraging previous work. It's easy to identify relationships. It's easy to identify degrading relationships. We can use this graph theory to identify critical relationships based on bits of the schedule. So when do we need to be really kind of working with to build up a particular relationship based on the schedule that we've got? But we're just not doing that. It's a data-driven role, and absolutely supplemented by somebody's personal engagement style, but it's just not it's not got that data-driven side to it at the moment. Project controls is another one, and actually I took this straight from Google, so I'm not sure what the source is, but this is the first result you get on Google, which doesn't mean it's right, but that it's just an interesting definition that Google's come up with. So project controls are the gathering, data management, and analytical processes used to predict, understand, and constructively influence the time and cost outcomes of a project or program through the communication of information in formats that assist effective management and decision making. Now that to me sounds like a very data-driven forensic role, but all my experience of project controls people is that it isn't so much like that. So I think the definition is right, but actually what's happening day to day is not forensic, it's not data-driven, and that's because the project data is not being recorded, used, it's all being buried or lost. So we've talked about a few different roles now. How many roles does this apply to? Does it apply to every role? What about schedulers, planners? What about the cost estimation or the procurement, benefits management, project management? the resource management? What about the supply chain management of sponsors? So of course, this requires leadership and people management skills, but these roles will rapidly evolve, and all of them will involve evidence-based decision making as well. So this isn't really a pipe dream. I think this can all be done today, but there are a few obstacles. This is why this hasn't happened already, and we'll discuss a few of these. So the biggest challenge, I think, challenge number one I've got is the vision. So the pie chart you can see in the top right hand corner, this is the credit has to go to Logical Projects here. So as a survey they conducted about using artificial intelligence within projects, and the results showed that 49% of people had not even thought about it. So that's almost half the people had never even thought about using artificial intelligence within projects, and 8% of people are using it, but from our experience the use cases tend to be quite low level. They're not the kind of things that we discussed might be possible. And in the bottom left hand corner you've got what we call the Gartner chart. So this is a nice kind of diagram showing the maturity of data analytics. So on the y-axis you've got the value, so this is the sort of insights you get back from the analysis you're doing, and on the x-axis you've got the difficulty. So you're starting off with descriptive analytics. So this is the what happened. So this could be your sort of reporting in Power BI maybe, and then why did it happen? So you're sort of digging into that report and trying to understand what's going on. Then you've got your predictive analytics. So this is your machine learning and artificial intelligence about what will happen. So this might be predicting the weather or something, or another model. If you're given a load of features and those features have patterns and you're given a new data point, then you can make a prediction on that data point about maybe some binary outcome. And then finally you've got prescriptive analytics. So if you can re-engineer or reverse engineer those predictive analytics and say, okay, how can we make this happen based on those patterns we've observed in the features, and how can we make that happen? And really what we've seen at the moment is that a lot of projects are, if people are getting involved in project data analytics, then they're really sort of sticking around the descriptive analytics stage, which is great because that's where you start. You can't dive straight into prescriptive. You need to kind of walk up that staircase and build up those skills incrementally. But really, people aren't really progressing from there. They're going for dashboard overload, and they're not solving use cases. They're just doing what they can with the data they've got, which is also another big problem, and brings me on to challenge number two, which is all about the data. So we've got lots of data, but how do we leverage it? And what is its quality and completeness? Quite often the quality is quite poor, and by completeness it's just a technical term for number of nulls really. So is it aligned to our use cases? So this picks up what I was saying on the previous slide. Now it's great if you've got lots of data, and lots of data isn't necessarily the answer, because you might not be able to solve the biggest problems in your organizations with the data you've got. So you need to make sure it's aligned to our use cases. So you need to define those use cases, make sure that those are they're prioritized. So these are the biggest problems that your organization faces, and then you collect the data to solve those problems. You don't just solve the problems you can with the data you've got. And I think that really needs to be, in a lot of people's minds, that really needs to be flipped around. So what are there any patterns in the data, and do we have enough data volumes for machine learning? How do we process, clean and curate the data? Some people, that's a complete mystery about how that happens, or people haven't even thought about the process involved to do that kind of cleaning. And do we trust the data? So okay, the quality might be really high, but the accuracy might be really shocking. It might not actually portray the real world thing that the data is meant to model. So again, if people don't trust the data, then the insights coming out of the back end, are not that useful. So this is a slide that I've presented a lot of times before about Crossrail, and it really it really captures about what we're trying to, the message we're trying to convey about project data analytics. So if you consider all of everything that's collected and collated on a big project like Crossrail, so you can kind of split these things into two different boxes. So you've got the program technical information. So this is everything from the requirements, from the asset inventory, the drawings, the design, all the models, all of the quality management, and that's everything for building and operating, maintaining that railway. Okay, but then there's the other side of that. It's everything for actually constructing and building the railway in the first place. So this is the program control information. So this is all the schedules and the costs, all of the administration, all of the change control, all of the risk management, which we've spoken about quite a lot already, all of the financial information, the legal, the health and safety. So this will be incredibly extensive data sets on RIDDOR events, all of procuring information, all of the human resource information, and you know, there's so much information, and all of this is just an exhaust claim. So once the project is finished, created, it will just be archived and probably never ever used again at all. So on Crossrail, there are 26,000 changes to, and this is quite an old slide now, to the risk register. So £3 billion worth of risk and contingency spend was built into it. All of the installation reports, the KPI reports, observation reports, all will just be archived and not used. All the dashboards to report on progress, all of that information has all been cleaned and curated already. It's all in a database, but all is not used again. It's not used forensically when we're building a new Crossrail type project. It's all just it's a once through process, and that's just completely wrong. So I've put this in as part of the challenge, and really it's actually part of the solution. But I guess the challenge is that the solution doesn't exist yet. So we're working in collaboration with Sir Robert McAlpine, Kia, Mace, UCL, Discovering Safety, and the Open Data Institute on what we call in the Construction Data Trust. So we know that we need to share and pool data in order to improve the insights we get from it, but doing this in a secure way where people are happy to contribute and give their data is proving to be very difficult. So a data trust provides the legal framework for people to safely share this data, and it means that it's not just a database that has no password protection for people to go in and take the data they want and rip it all out and create their own insights. You can define the permissions and the data visibility down to any cell of the database, so that it's completely safe in that respect. And like I said, you've got the legal framework and everything built in right from the beginning, so that people feel safe and that they can trust it, of course. So the idea is that the data trust is used to collaborate and define the use cases. And if we pool the data and everybody works on it together, then we can advance a lot faster and really reduce the barriers to innovation. So the third challenge is around capability, and also very closely linked to that about capacity. So there's a real capability, a real lack of capability and capacity across the industry, and most people aren't even thinking about it, let alone planning for it. So coming back to this survey from Logical, if 50% of people haven't even thought about it, then definitely not planning for it. And it isn't just about one profession, it's about the cross-fertilization between all the data people and between all the project people. If you could separate them out into two groups, it's not just about the project people learning a bit about what the data, the sort of data communities do and know. It's all about the data communities learning more about projects as well. So this cross-fertilization, I think, is really, really important. And things are beginning to change. There are events that sort of promote these two different groups of people swapping places, but there's still a long way to go, and we'll talk more about that later on in the webinar as well. So how can we respond to this? Now, is this, so in your organization, do you really want a central team or do you want to upskill existing staff? So the kind of conventional way of doing data analytics is that you have your data analyst or you have your big team, and then you have all of your project people separate to that. So if they want something, if they want a piece of analysis done, then somebody will go to that team and they'll convey their problem to them. The analysts will probably not understand it all that well. They'll go away for 5 days, create their report, and then they'll report this back to the project team, and maybe sort of baffle them and confuse them a bit. All of this takes a long time, and the results aren't all that useful. And if you compare this with this idea of sort of data capability sort of infecting the rest of the organization, so rather than having a team or an analyst that just supports everybody, then the project controls, the project managers, the engineers, they're actually upskilled so they can do their own analysis. They already have a really good baseline for understanding the broad business, and people like document controllers, cost estimators, and BIM, then they can start to use all of these skills in their everyday job rather than going through a team that doesn't have a very good broad understanding of the business. So these are about hybrid roles, bringing analytics to transform the functions and of the business and the profession as a whole. And I'll talk more about that on the next slide. So is this a brand new set of roles? I think it is. I think it's about having what we call pie-shaped people. So this is somebody that's got one leg in project delivery and another leg in data analytics. So they've got a really broad understanding of the business. And I think that we need to take the people who already have, they have both legs at the moment in project delivery. They need to take one leg out of there and put it into data analytics. They need to upskill themselves in these areas that are relevant for their role. So how specialist do I want to be? And I've got 3 different answers to that question. So there's the translator role. So we run hackathons within the company. So we have sponsors that bring events, that bring challenges to maybe in construction, and then we have members of the public that want to kind of get involved and solve these. And you can really see that you have data people come to these events and you have project people come to these events, and it's very difficult for these people to communicate with each other. The project people can't do the analysis they need, but they struggle to understand what's possible, and the data people don't know how to manage the challenge, how to deliver it on time, or maybe they don't understand the problem they're trying to solve in the first case. So you need these translator people that can kind of coordinate the whole, the whole data analytics life cycle. So they have a very broad understanding of everything, but they can't necessarily, start jumping and doing the coding and doing the analysis themselves, but they can certainly talk about it from the project's perspective and the data perspective. Then you have the generalist practitioner, so very similar to the translator, but they can jump in and they can code, so they might not have such a great understanding of the sort of project management side of it, but they can, they might be able to do some coding in Python, they might be experienced with automation, they might be able to create some data visualization in Power BI. And then finally, I guess kind of the natural progression is that you have a specialist practitioner. And I don't think any of these is better than the other one. I think we need all 3 of them. So this is somebody that really goes for the focus. So somebody's a developer building maybe websites or machine learning models. They're somebody who's really immersed in the Microsoft suite, and they're in charge of publishing all of the Power BI reports to the Power BI service, and they're integrating Python code with it. So they're the real specialist practitioner, but you need the translator roles in order to communicate these people with the project people. So I think you need to decide if this is of interest to you, then this drives how technical you become. And if you need to specialize in the third case, or if you just need that broad understanding. So what opportunities is this bringing to the table? And really, I think it's opening the door for these pathfinders, so that we're in an opportunity now where all of these project people can upskill, and they can start to change their roles. So there are so many different roles out there that will change over the next few years. They're going to start deriving new insights and capabilities. They're going to be on a completely new career path that's going to be just coming off at a tangent from the next couple of years, and the capabilities that they acquire will be completely emergent. So I've seen that some of you have already been filling in my Mentimeter slide, and I've dropped a QR code there. So if you could navigate to mentimeter.com, and if you've got a smartphone, if you just open the camera and point at that QR code, it should prompt you and take you straight to Mentimeter if you tap the screen. So historically, QR code's not the most reliable thing, but I thought I'd drop it in there just for convenience. I think if you've got a Samsung phone, it should work. I'm sure the QR codes are built into most cameras now. So if you drop in the code 683895, then you should be straight into my Mentimeter voting slides, and you can vote on one of these options. So where does my organization start? So I'll just read through the slide and then we'll jump into Menti and have a look at some of the results. So option one, is it random? Is it driven by enthusiasts? Is it ad hoc bits of analysis at the moment, typically under the radar? And is it completely uncoordinated and is driven by somebody who's kind of interested in it? And when that interested person is made a better offer, then they leave the company, and that bit of analytics or whatever it was in the company just fades out, and as if it never happened. Is it option number two? Is experimental? So you've got small business experiments. It's driven by business cases. You've got little bits of, so you are creating sort of a development within the company, but it's all incremental, and you iterate via little pilots and share good practice between each other. Or option three, where this really sort of strategic option, which is a high level vision, usually baked in right from the beginning of the project. Usually it's got exec level agreement. You've got a proper data strategy and roadmap. You've got these pathfinders that we mentioned, or champions for the data analytics or machine learning. You pull data and share code and algorithms and share all that good practice as well. So I'll jump over to Mentimeter and we can have a look. And the results are still coming in. So relatively evenly distributed. There is a slight, so I guess maybe there is different sector strategy behind them. So that could be the reasoning behind that. So how do I start? What's the art of the possible? And if you do have time, then pick a real niche and start to learn about it. So don't try and do everything at once if you haven't got time and you're not passionate about it. And if you do, then I think pick something very small. If you do have passion and time for this, then just hold on for my next slide. And if you're kind of on the fence, then I think you need to think about sort of the next 3 points. So you need to understand what's influencing your decision. Is it that you've got some fear, you're a bit scared about how hard this is? Is it the idea that you don't really know what's possible at the moment? Are you one of these 49% that Logical Projects pulled out? And if you are, I think you need to go away and research what is possible, especially what's going to be possible and what's going to be useful for your role. Or do you have a lack of time? Do you need to find some time, maybe in the evenings? There are a lot of meetups and ways to learn outside of normal working hours, and we can talk about that in a minute as well. So you need to understand the impact on your role and your career, and I think that's where the point we talked about above. You need to understand what's possible. If you don't know what's possible, then you're never going to be able to understand the impact on your career. But I'm confident that the impact on lots of roles, so all the roles we discussed, plus quantity surveyors, people like document controllers, then it could be really significant. Not to say these people will be out of jobs, but I think they will be expected to step into this data space much, much more and you need to understand how is your market moving. So maybe you are in the financial sector, or that is actually quite mature already, and this isn't as necessary. Or maybe you might be in the construction sector, which is sort of famously slightly less mature, and maybe these things will be much more relevant to you. So you need to understand, where your market is moving as well. So getting started, we've got 6 different things that you can do, and as you start at the top, this is the least level of commitment. As you work your way down, then you're committing much more time. So if you haven't got much time, then definitely start these things at the top. And I think the biggest point here surround these sort of MOOCs. I think when people are interested in this kind of thing, they want to learn, they jump straight in for the MOOCs. So MOOC stands for Massive Online Open Course. So these things like Udemy, Coursera, Pluralsight, that's when people jump in. They get sort of 2 or 3 videos into a 20 video series, and they get kind of bored and stop. They can't really they can't really get involved in things like Kaggle competitions because they're just too advanced. They're impenetrable at that time, and they lose motivation. So I would urge people to kind of to go for communities. So things like Meetup, there are so many great meetups out there. We have our own meetup group, Project Data Analytics. So a quick plug for that. So if you're interested in this stuff, then please check out our. If you just go to our website, it will be easy to find us. Things like hackathons, again, another plug for us. We have our own hackathon, which I mentioned earlier, Project Hack. So hackathons are a really great way to not only to learn more, but to also network as well. It's probably one of the only things here where you actually get to kind of build out your network, which is just so important. Again, the MOOCs, really, really useful, but I don't think it's the best place to start. I think a lot of people run out of motivation. The Kaggle competitions, like I said, are a bit impenetrable. These are competitions, and I'm sure there are lots at the moment surrounding COVID-19. There are problems that are sort of posted through Kaggle, and then people work up their solutions, and then they're judged independently. And there are sometimes really, really big prizes from the winning solutions. Events. So again, things like hackathons, but other events as well, like conferences. You can find these kind of things. A lot of them are on Eventbrite. And again, that sort of the biggest level of commitment, arguably, I guess, could be Kaggle if you've got a really a big project you're working on. But things like, creating your own projects or code and putting these things on GitHub and LinkedIn, etc. And then I guess there's slightly more structured training as well. So things like apprenticeships in data analysts. So all of the things that you would learn from these different communities, hackathons, MOOCs, etc., can be built into a bit more structure, and I'll talk about that more if I get a moment later on. So about developing your technical competence, I think this is similar to the Gartner chart. So starting off as a reporting in PowerPoint and Excel, and building that on that, and sort of developing it into sort of dashboards and automation using Power Automate and UiPath and Power BI. And then the learning curve really increases, and connecting and qualifying and integrating data using Python Power Apps, and actually building towards sort of the predictive side of things, and extracting predictive insights using TensorFlow, Azure, Python, and AWS. But the key sort of point about this is you need to understand what your aspirations are. So what's driving you to go and learn about these things, and what will be useful for your role. If there's no use in you learning anything about extracting predictive insights, and the learning curve really jumps up around the sort of the dashboard area, then there's no need for you to invest that amount of time in it, and you'll get a good return on your investment of time. So it's just something to bear in mind about this real jump up in the learning curve as you go from sort of into the predictive stage of data analytics. So I can say a bit more about structured training. There are courses out there that like foundation degree apprenticeships for project data analytics. So these can be funded by 95% or 100% by government. So it won't cost you anything. We actually run 4 of these a year, but I won't do too much sales on that. And they're for all ages and experience. Our course lasts 15 months and you cover things like Python, visualization in Power BI, automation, all of the things that you'd get from kind of MOOCs and hackathons, even Kaggle competitions, events, and you're part of communities as well. So they're a really good way for people to get, rounded tuition from experts in the field. And if you want to know more about that, then please get in touch with me or someone in my team. So again, back to Mentimeter. I'm hoping that we can create a bit of a series of these. So starting off with sort of how to get started with project data analytics, and maybe building on how to get started with Power BI or Python or automation or data engineering. So if you please jump back to Mentimeter, hopefully you've still got it open in your browser. I will bring us on to the next slide, and then you should be allowed to vote on this. So I've got no data coming at the moment, hoping that the data starts to flow in any second. So I mean, I can't promise anything. I haven't had any confirmation, but if we were allowed to do another 45-minute webinar on how to get started in these things, what would be most interesting to you? It looks like Power BI, engineering. That's great. So we've had 150 responses there. I can see that we've got 323 people here. So it'd be great if we could have a few more, slowly ticking up, a few more people to respond. We've not even got half the people responding so far. Okay, it feels like it's converging, and that's going to be our ordering. So like I said, can't promise anything, but hopefully I will be able to negotiate this webinar series with the APM, and we can build in this series of webinars on how to get started with these technical things. So I've already made it a quick plug for Project Hack and Project Meetup, but here are the QR codes if you're more interested. So Project Meetup, we meet at the moment with the current COVID situation. We're meeting up on Zoom, of course, but we've doubled the amount of meetings. So we meet on Wednesday evenings, and we have an industry specialist come along and talk to us about project data analytics and maybe their experience or their encounters. And then Project Hack, like I said, we have sponsors that bring challenges generally from construction at the moment, and then we have enthusiastic members of the community that want to solve those challenges. And that is everything that I wanted to say. Hopefully we'll have this new series of webinars that we can go through, but thank you everyone for listening in. And here's a QR code to my LinkedIn if you're interested in linking in with me or messaging me privately. And yeah, thank you very much, and I hope you guys have got some questions for me.
Thank you, James. That's fantastic, and we've definitely received a lot of comments from the attendees saying fascinating presentation. Thank you for sharing. And there's definitely some questions lined up ready for you. Some people are definitely asking about the Project Hack, and if you could go into a little bit more detail about that. And someone said, is it open to people based around the world, or is it just for people in the UK?
Sure, no problem. So generally we run Project Hacks in London, and we have had people come in from different countries fly in for the event, but of course with the current COVID situation, it's all on Zoom. So usually it's at the Microsoft Reactor. We have 100 attendees, and it's kind of first come, first serve. We have about 10 challenges, and then people split into groups of about 5 or 6 people, and they work on a challenge, and then they present their results at the end. This time it's all on Zoom, so it's slightly different. I think it will be a different event, but we're hoping, we put a lot of time and planning into how it's going to work on Zoom. We're going to use different breakout rooms. to make sure that people still have that sort of really small group feel. And then and we're opening up the numbers, so we're going to go way beyond. I think we're already way beyond 150 attendees, and the challenges are looking really exciting. So the idea is that you work on your challenges. I think of there are about 10 or 15 challenges this time around, and then there are £1,000 worth of prizes. So you'll be judged by the panel based on what you produce, and then you'll be ranked, and prizes will be given out accordingly. But they're for, because it's on Zoom, they're open to anybody, and they're open to. We've talked a lot about these sort of pie-shaped people, and we really try and bring sort of project people and data people together to try and make them, communicate with each other and try and get people to form this sort of translator role, sort of organically, really.
Excellent.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, certainly does. And currently shown on the screen is your contact details. So I encourage people to reach out to James to take that forward. So if you don't mind, I'll try and get as many questions across to you. From the
please do.
So Jason has asked, what are some of the valuable insights that have been made so far with project data which organisations have found surprising?
So I think probably one of the most interesting insights that we've come across is in the safety from the safety data. So a lot of work has been done with siloed data. So people have looked at sort of RIDDOR events and tried to understand, are there patterns in when I don't know what RIDDOR stands for, and I should, but it's a reportable event that has to be reported to HSE, and you have to make all this data really clear and transparent to them. So if you have an event on site like a death or something awful like that, then all of these things have to be reported. So and this kind of data was looked at in a very siloed way in the past, but Project Data Analytics has allowed the integration of things like who's been on site, the amount of hours that people have been working, of course the RIDDOR events themselves, things like the weather, things like local events or sporting events. So the integration of sort of 10 or 15 different data sets, and it actually, it transpires that the RIDDOR events are actually very closely linked to how much time people are spending on site. So if they spend more than that 8 hours the day, then there's a significantly higher chance of a RIDDOR event occurring the next day. So that's the kind of insight that we're looking for.
Excellent, thank you very much. Adeline has got a question. How do we attract data scientists into project organisations in order to get started? I think Adeline's tried previously in her organisation, but struggled to get any interest from quality experts.
I think that is a really great question, and the reason that there aren't lots of data analysts and data scientists because in that sector at the moment is probably because for some reason it isn't that it doesn't appear to be that attractive. So I think using things like hackathons to to drive a bit of sort of, if a company attends a hackathon, then you can start placing these things on LinkedIn, and we need to sort of build this I think this sort of change really that there are really interesting problems. It's not just about lessons learned. I think it is slowly changing. 10 years ago it was all about lessons learned and just creating new buckets of lessons learned, and now really, because we're able to integrate different data sources and make really kind of impactful statements about the data we collect, I think we need to show this off to the world through various mediums, any medium we can. Maybe that's LinkedIn, maybe that's bringing interesting problems to hackathons, and then maybe the data people are attracted to something else in there, but they see the problems in there, and it starts to sort of build a bit of momentum, and we make it an exciting area for people, because I think it really is. I mean, the things that we've worked on around the safety data and that a few other machine learning projects we've worked on, they're really very interesting problems to solve. I think we just need to get the word out there a bit more.
Perfect. Thanks for that advice, and hopefully that helps add a line in the future. So we've got a question, obviously with the current challenges we have with COVID-19. Project data analytics would offer huge solutions to tracking COVID-19 cases, and these would help manage and monitor the spread. What are your thoughts on this, please? And he says thank you for the presentation as well.
So we have talked about doing building in COVID challenges to the hack, and we're not sure about sort of track and trace on construction sites, whether that's a good idea or not. So I'm not sure about. I can't promise any challenges like that, but I think there's massive potential for project data analytics, not only kind of tracking and tracing the spread, but also assessing things like productivity of everybody working from home. Because once COVID is over, then I don't suppose the world is going to go back to normal, and it would be interesting if we had some analytics about which bits of our working days should go back to normal, and which bits probably need to evolve because we're potentially more productive in certain bits of our role. So I think it has a huge potential to help, and also disrupt our daily lives as well, and then make sure we're polluting the environment less, and we're getting more time with our families as well.
Lovely, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I don't know who posted this question, but it's regards to, is there a danger of over-relying on past experience data to cope with the future?
I think there always is a danger if you're doing analytics, so predictive analytics. There is always a danger that the data you're training your model in is not an accurate representation of the scenario you're trying to predict. So that's no different in predicting if a project is going to be on time, to predicting whether somebody is likely to have cancer at some point in their life, or so I think it's very, very important, but there are lots of tests and checks you can build into models to ensure that the data that you've got is accurate and is a good representation of what you're trying to model. So yes, there is a big risk, but it's things that we already have measures in place to account for them. I guess projects are, in the whole, some people say they're completely unique, so it's very difficult to reuse that kind of information. But if you break them down into their modular components, bits of projects, the sort of exhaust plume of data that we were speaking about at the beginning of the webinar, if you break it down into sort of modular chunks, then bits of this can be, huge chunks of it can be reused. No project is a once through process completely on its own. I just don't believe that. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, James. Lots more positive comments coming through from the attendees. A couple of people asked about the content and will it be made available? Yes, it will. James is kindly allowing us to record this session, and will hopefully give us the latest presentation that we can then share on the APM website. So please.
I absolutely will. I made a couple of slides, changes to slides. So the copy that Robert's got is not the latest one, but I will, of course, forward the latest copy on.
You star, thank you. So someone's asked, what's the best way to learn for a university student? Any top tips?
I guess it depends. It depends how they've been learning at the moment. I think, without sounding like a broken record, it comes back to that slide I had with the level of sort of commitment. I think, don't fall victim of jumping straight into what I think a lot of people do, to the online content, to YouTube and Udemy, and getting frustrated when you're not seeing the results you want. I think it's more productive to go and meet people, find like-minded people, and I think that's what they don't spring to that initially. So I would go to, not necessarily our hackathon, but go to hackathons, join some data analytics meetups. If you're a university student, you're probably very good at, and you probably got access to a lot of content, but you might not have access to the sort of the like-minded people. And I think I would go and I would try and find those people, and then maybe all learn together and sort of develop your motivation in that way, as opposed to sitting through video after video after video.
Excellent. I think that's some great advice there. So hopefully we get more people interested and learning around this key topic. David's asked a question. He started off by saying, fascinating presentation. How do you see the challenges and risks for those organisations which now have simple project management methods and not using PMM nor business systems, and then in brackets such as O365 and their apps and data tools? They may be this way now for good reason, but are there any risks and being left behind on the curve?
So just say the beginning part of that question again. Sorry, Robert.
Yeah. How do you see the challenges and risks for those organisations which now have simple project management methods and not using PMM nor business systems?
Okay. I think it's a good question. So if you're a small organization and the way that you do your P3M management is slightly immature, are you going to be left behind? I guess that's the question.
Yes, yeah, I'm taking it that way.
I think there is a risk of that happening. If you're not using the various bits of sort of standard software, then it's difficult to capture the information in the same way. So I think you need to be really careful about doing the same thing that everybody's done for 40 years and using Excel for everything, because then it really does go straight in the bin when the project's finished. So I think there is, you need to have a strategy, and that strategy might mean you need to invest in some piece of the software, maybe the Office 365 suite. I think a lot of people do have that, and there are a lot of different bolt-ons that you can get for no additional cost with Office 365. So I think one sort of mitigation for capturing that information using things like Power Apps. People kind of have heard of Power Apps, but they don't really know really what it's for, and they certainly wouldn't know how to create their own app. But actually, it's relatively straightforward for somebody with some coding experience, very, very basic coding experience. And then you can start to do away with lots of the Excel spreadsheets and all of those static documents that people create that ultimately just go in the bin when the project's finished. So I think you need to use what you've got, make sure you're using that to its full potential, ensure that you absolutely are. And if you're creating these static documents, then you need to rethink why you're doing it, and maybe invest some time, as opposed to just firefighting the whole time, and maybe invest some time in building or adopting some sort of system that means that the information is being captured for the future.
Lovely. Thank you for that information. And
it's a difficult question to answer, though. So I will think about that a bit more. But very interesting question. Very, very difficult to answer.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing a bit for it now. I'll definitely send you the questions after this so that we can expand on them.
Yeah, brilliant.
So final one, I'm conscious of the time, but we've had a great one from Benedetta. Do you think the advent of this technology could decrease the amount of creativity we use in our jobs right now? Things like brainstorming could not be used anymore. What are your thoughts? And then it ends with, thank you for the great presentation.
I think that it will increase innovation and productivity in that area because of the things that we shouldn't be doing. So we shouldn't have to be digging through. So automation, for example, the amount of when I teach automation to people, they don't understand what can be automated these days. And you can see people's eyes literally light up and they realize that every Monday morning, they don't need to be opening the browser, downloading this document, copying and pasting it all into a Word document, and then drawing a bar chart and then exporting it as a PDF and emailing to the whole team. And it takes them an hour and a half. And people get that time back. And that's not, that's not what we should be doing as human beings. Human beings are really good at those brainstorming sessions and coming up with innovative solutions to things. I think it gives us things like automation and data analytics. It gives us more time to actually invest in what is really interesting and what really adds value. So I would say, I honestly believe the opposite will happen as long as we do it in the right way. And anything where predictive insights are being created, of course, we mustn't just take that as gospel and assume it's correct. All of these things, if you're looking at pulling up previous risks that an algorithm has decided are relevant to your project based on certain parameters, then this needs to be overseen by a human and not just taken as 100% fact, because that is never safe. So there does need to be certain checks and systems in place to make sure that things are right. But no, I really think we'll get more opportunity to innovate and brainstorm.
That's great. I think being creative and brainstorming is certainly the way ahead. James,
definitely.
There's many more thank you comments from the attendees, and I would certainly like to express my thanks to you for taking the time to share this information and also answering the questions.
It's a pleasure.
So on that note, I'd just like to say thank you, keep well, and hope to see you all at future webinars.